Israel Keys, kill kits, cold eyes, and a killer without a pattern. He didn't kill for a cause. He didn't target a type. He had rules, and he broke every one of them. He didn't want fame. He wanted control. Most serial killers follow a pattern. They pick a type, a victim profile, a method, a city. They want to be known, feared, remembered. But Israel Keys didn't want any of that. He didn't want the spotlight. He didn't even want you to know his name. He wanted control. Pure, silent, terrifying control. He buried kill kits across the United States, plastic tubs filled with weapons, duct tape, and Drano, sometimes years before he'd even choose his victim. He flew to cities he'd never been to, rented cars, drove hundreds of miles, and killed without connection. No link between him and the people he chose, no emotional trigger, no psychological profile, just opportunity and planning. And when he was finally caught, it wasn't by brilliant forensics or high-tech surveillance. It was by accident. A stupid, routine mistake that blew open the case of a man the FBI now believes could be responsible for dozens of murders across America. But Keys didn't give them closure. He gave them riddles. He gave them just enough to hold their breath. And then he took his secrets to the grave. This is the story of Israel Keys, the most organized, untraceable, and terrifying killer you've probably never heard of. Welcome to the American Mysteries Archives. The bank robber who didn't fit the profile. It was a routine morning in Anchorage, Alaska. February 2012. Snow on the ground. The kind of cold that cuts through bone. At a small roadside espresso stand, Common Grounds, an 18-year-old barista named Samantha Koenig began her shift alone. She never came home. That night, her boyfriend received a strange text. Phone died, battery charged, come to me. It wasn't her style. The wording felt off, and the next day, surveillance footage confirmed their worst fear. A masked man had entered the kiosk, pulled a gun, and forced her out. In less than a minute, she was gone. Anchorage PD launched a massive search. Flyers, press conferences, dogs, volunteers. But Samantha had vanished. Then, a break. Weeks later, her family received another text. This time, it directed them to a local park. Taped to a bulletin board was a ransom note demanding $30,000. Along with a photograph that appeared to show Samantha alive, bound, and holding a newspaper. The family deposited the money, and they waited. That's when the man, who would later be identified as Israel Keys, made his first mistake. He used Samantha's debit card at an ATM in Arizona, then again in Texas, then again in New Mexico, each time wearing a disguise. But investigators tracked the withdrawals. They pulled footage. They watched the pattern. And on March 13th, 2012, in Lufkin, Texas, Keys was finally stopped by a Texas state trooper for a minor traffic violation. Inside his car, Samantha's debit card, her cell phone, a ski mask, a roll of cash, and a loaded pistol. But Keyes didn't confess. Not right away. He didn't even mention Samantha. Instead, he talked about robberies, break-ins, bank heists. He said he liked to practice, to stay sharp, to push himself. And the FBI realized something that chilled them to the core. Israel Keyes wasn't just a kidnapper. He was a professional predator with years of experience. They had caught him for one crime, but it was only the beginning. What he did to Samantha. When Israel Keyes was finally cornered in a Texas interrogation room, he knew the game was over. But he wasn't panicked. He wasn't scared. He was calm, almost clinical. He said, "I'll talk, but only if you meet my terms." He didn't want his name in the media. He didn't want to be tried in court. And most of all, he didn't want his daughter to ever know what he'd done. Over the following weeks, Keyes slowly unraveled the story of what really happened to Samantha Koenig. And it was worse than anyone imagined. After abducting her from the coffee stand, Keyes brought Samantha to a tool shed behind his house, while his girlfriend and 10-year-old daughter were inside, just a few feet away. He tied her up, sexually assaulted her, then strangled her, all before midnight. Then, like nothing had happened, he poured himself a glass of wine and watched a movie with his girlfriend. Samantha was already dead, long before he sent the ransom demand. But Keyes wasn't done. The photo he'd sent her family? It had been staged. He used fishing line to prop her eyelids open, applied makeup to make her appear alive, and posed her holding a newspaper. He had frozen her body for days, just to pull off the illusion. The family deposited the ransom money, hoping she was still alive. But Samantha had been dead for weeks. When investigators searched Keyes' property, they found bloodstains in the shed. They found zip ties, a tarp, tools, and later he led them to a remote lake in Alaska, where he had dismembered her and dumped her remains beneath the frozen surface. He was matter-of-fact, emotionless, detached, like he was describing how to fix a sink, not how he had ended a life. This was Israel Keyes. No remorse, no motive, just method. And the scariest part? Samantha wasn't his first. She was just the one who got him caught. Kill kits buried across America. When agents asked Israel Keyes if Samantha was his only victim, he laughed. "You've got a lot of work ahead of you," he told them. Because Keyes didn't just commit murder. He planned it, prepared for it, trained for it. He would fly into one city, rent a car, and drive hundreds of miles, all to find a victim in a town that had no idea he was even there. He had no victim profile, no emotional trigger, no messy history or criminal record to connect him to the scenes. But the most terrifying part, he had help, not from other people, from himself, years earlier. All across the United States, Israel Keyes had buried kill kits, Home Depot buckets filled with everything he would need to abduct, kill, and vanish, without leaving a trace. Inside those kits, zip ties, ammunition cache silencers, Drano to accelerate decomposition, garbage bags, shovels, duct tape, Anchorage, Essex, Tupper Lake, scattered across the map like markers on a deadly road trip. He called them kits of opportunity, and he buried them years in advance. Some kits sat untouched for over a decade before he used them. One of those kits led him to Vermont in 2011. There, he chose Bill and Lorraine Currier, a married couple living in a modest house in Essex. It was completely random. No vendetta, no connection. He broke into their home in the middle of the night, tied them up, took them to an abandoned farmhouse. Then he shot Bill, sexually assaulted Lorraine, and murdered her too. Afterward, he demolished the entire building just to make sure police would never find any evidence. And they didn't. Bill and Lorraine Currier were just gone until Keyes told them. He gave details only the killer could know. He described the layout of the Curriers' home, down to the clock in the hallway. He drew maps to the site of the missing farmhouse. He even showed investigators the exact woods where he had parked his car. He didn't confess because of guilt. He confessed because he was bored, because he liked watching the agents react, because it gave him back the one thing he craved more than killing: control. And when they asked how many more there were, he just said, "You'll find them if you look hard enough." Rules of a killer. In the world of serial killers, most are driven by impulse, obsession, rage, childhood trauma. They leave behind chaos and clues, but not Israel Keyes. He had rules. He followed them like a code, a personal doctrine designed not to avoid guilt, but to avoid getting caught. Rule 1. Never kill where you live. Rule 2. Never use the same method twice. Rule 3. Always pay in cash. Rule 4. Never talk about it. Ever. He told the FBI, "I would fly into one state, rent a car, and drive 500 to 1,000 miles to pick someone at random. Then I'd leave the way I came." He'd turn off his phone long before he arrived. He avoided toll booths. He never used ATM cards near a kill site. He even checked to make sure there were no security cameras in the area before striking. And he didn't just target strangers. He targeted places, public parks, campgrounds, isolated trails, homes with open garages, anywhere with opportunity. He'd walk through neighborhoods in the early morning dressed like a jogger, looking for an open door, an unlocked window, a routine he could break. But even with all his rules, he couldn't help but slip. He admitted he was getting reckless toward the end, too confident, too bold. He said abducting Samantha Koenig was a mistake, too close to home, too messy. But he couldn't stop, because even with the rules, he needed it. It wasn't about rage, he said. It was about the adrenaline, the act, the silence afterward. And every time he finished, he would return to normal life. He ran a construction business. He went on cruises. He helped raise his daughter. No one suspected a thing. No one ever does. Until it's too late. A daughter, a cabin, and the final confession. There was one thing, maybe the only thing, that seemed to reach Israel Keyes on a human level. His daughter. He never said her name publicly. He refused to allow photos. He even threatened to stop cooperating with investigators if they so much as mentioned her. He said, "She's innocent. This is mine, not hers." While he was out burying kill kits and abducting strangers, he was also picking her up from school, helping with homework, living like a quiet, helpful single dad. But in the back of his mind and in the shed behind his house, the darkness waited. Investigators wanted him to talk. They needed names, dates, locations. They hoped for closure, for families who had waited years without answers. And sometimes he gave it to them. He described the Courier murders in brutal detail. He drew maps. He explained how he dumped Samantha Koenig's remains under the ice in Matanuska Lake. But when they pushed too hard, he shut down. Because for Israel Keyes, information was currency. He wanted control of his narrative, even in captivity. So the FBI flew him to remote locations, bought him coffee, let him sketch crime scenes on yellow legal pads. They hoped that if they kept him comfortable, he'd keep talking. But on December 2, 2012, in his Anchorage jail cell, Keyes used a disposable razor to cut his wrists. He also tied a bedsheet around his neck. Double insurance. He killed himself before the trial, before he could name all his victims, before the FBI could extract the rest of what he knew. When agents searched his cell, they found a macabre final message. 12 drawings of skulls, 11 of them numbered, 1 left unmarked, and beneath them, the chilling phrase scrawled in black ink, "We are one." To this day, no one knows exactly what that meant. Was it a taunt, a message, a confession, or something more? How many did he kill? Israel Keyes never gave investigators a final number. He refused, but he did leave hints. He admitted to at least 3 murders outright. Samantha Koenig in Alaska Bill and Lorraine Courier in Vermont. Then there were the kill kits, found buried in New York, Texas, Wyoming, Washington, and Arizona. Each one represented a plan, a possibility, or a crime already committed. The FBI believes Keyes may be responsible for 11 murders. Some investigators think the number is much higher, perhaps 20, maybe more. Here's why. His travel records showed dozens of unexplained flights, often to states where unsolved disappearances occurred. There are missing persons cases that match his methods. Remote locations, no connection, no leads. And in his own words, he said, "There are bodies that will never be found." But Keyes was deliberate. If he didn't want you to find them, you wouldn't. He destroyed evidence. He avoided cameras. He never left a trace unless he wanted to. And the families of those potential victims, they're still waiting. They don't have names, they don't have dates, they don't have closure. Because when Keyes took his life, he took the answers with him. And perhaps that was always the plan. The psychology of pure control. Serial killers often come with labels. Narcissist, sociopath, trauma-driven, power-hungry. But when the FBI brought in behavioral profilers to study Israel Keyes, they hit a wall because he didn't fit. He didn't have a tragic childhood, no obvious abuse, no long psychiatric record, no trail of escalating violence like so many others. In fact, his early life was almost boring. Born in Utah in 1978, raised in a devoutly religious and isolated Kurd household, homeschooled, taught to distrust government and outsiders. He moved with his family to remote Washington state, living off the grid. But somewhere along the line, something twisted. He became obsessed with serial killers, read about Ted Bundy, BTK, and H.H. Holmes, not with horror, but with admiration. He once said, "I realized I was different. I didn't feel things the way other people did." He joined the army, served in Egypt and the US. By all accounts, he was quiet, reliable, a hard worker. But beneath that was a mind meticulously crafting a lifestyle that allowed him to vanish at will. His motivation? Not hatred, not fame, control. He didn't just want to end a life. He wanted to control every aspect of it, from the moment of abduction to the disposal to the legacy. He controlled the timeline. He controlled the narrative. And even after death, he controlled the mystery. He left investigators with just enough breadcrumbs to keep looking, but never enough to solve the full puzzle. Even in silence, Israel Keyes held the upper hand, and that's what separates him from most other killers. He didn't want to be caught. He didn't want to be known. He wanted to be forgotten, but never outsmarted. And that's exactly what makes him so terrifying. What if he hadn't slipped? Here's the question that keeps agents up at night. The question that haunts investigators, families, and anyone who's studied this case. What if Israel Keyes hadn't messed up? If he hadn't used Samantha Koenig's debit card, if he hadn't taken that road trip south and made himself visible on ATMs, if he hadn't been pulled over by a Texas trooper, he might still be out there, burying more kill kits, planning the next random murder, living as a devoted father by day and a ghost by night. Because that's what made him truly dangerous. He wasn't killing for attention. He wasn't writing letters to newspapers like the Zodiac. He wasn't leaving behind signature crime scenes. He was killing in silence. And if not for one small mistake, he would have disappeared back into the shadows again. We only know about a fraction of what he did. We'll probably never know the full truth, and that makes him worse than many of the more infamous names. Because we caught Ted Bundy, we can read his confessions, we know his victims, We understand, at least somewhat, the pattern. But with keys, it's like standing in the dark, hearing footsteps, and never knowing where they lead. He was the nightmare that doesn't speak. And for every kill kit found, every map traced, every cold case revisited, there's always the thought there could be another one. The legacy of Israel Keyes. In the end, Israel Keyes didn't want a legacy. No manifesto, no final monologue, no name carved into the annals of true crime infamy. And maybe that was the most calculated move of all. He wanted to disappear, just like his victims. But ironically, he didn't vanish. Not completely. Because his case became a turning point for how we think about killers, about patterns, about the myths we've built around evil. The FBI has since created new behavioral models based on Keyes. He redefined what organized could mean, what a low-profile predator could accomplish, and more importantly, he exposed just how fragile the line is between normal and monstrous. A man who raised a daughter, took family vacations, fixed homes, joked with friends, and buried buckets of death in the woods, like he was prepping for a twisted scavenger hunt. To this day, cold case investigators across the US still scan missing persons lists, wondering, did he do this one? And in states from Maine to Washington, shovels still break soil, hoping to unearth more of his secrets. We may never know how many lives Israel Keyes took. We may never know all the places he visited or all the names he buried. But one thing is certain. He walked among us. He planned for years, and no one ever saw him coming. This is the American Mysteries Archives. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, stay careful, and remember, not all monsters live in the shadows. Some of them are hiding in plain sight.
Subscribe for more chilling mysteries. Thanks for being here. See you in the next time.